Good evening. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Dr. Foley, roll call.
President Reese, members of the board, please let the record show that all members are present.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and have the Pledge of Allegiance after our moment of silence. Thank you.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
All right, on to our agenda. I move that we approve the agenda as it's presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, Dr. Foley, the superintendent's report.
President Reese, members of the board, we begin the superintendent's report with our favorite part of the night, which is the honoring and celebration of our amazing students and employees and volunteers. And tonight we're so excited because we have our littlest learners and those who support them in the house. So tonight we're going to have the joy of inviting the fabulous Mrs. Gleason and the wonderful Mrs. Stacy Outlay up to join us. And they are going to celebrate. And what will happen is that they will call one recognition at a time, and we'll have them come up here and stand here for pictures. So that way that we can carefully socially distance while still celebrating each and every one of you. So tonight we will turn it over to Mrs. Gleason to honor her special people here tonight.
Thank you so much, Dr. Foley. Good evening, President Reese, members of the board, and our cabinet. Oh my gosh. So excited, and our community, so excited that it's our turn tonight to share our special nominations with you. So we're going to begin with Cooley because C comes before S. So, and I'm sorry, but our Amy Scott Jones, who is our teacher, Point of Pride, is not here today. She had surgery and she is home resting where she should be, so she could be back in school on the 29th. So I did want to share a little bit about her with you though. So Amy Scott Jones is an early childhood teacher in our Brilliant Beginnings classroom at Cooley Preschool, and she's been there for 8 years. She loves the littles and continually connects with our youngest learners, building a foundation for all future education experiences. I'm so excited, I gotta take my breath. She is always willing and always helpful and can always find the humor and the laughs in situations that arise. And mind you, there are plenty in a Brilliant Beginnings classroom every day. She is joyful and a positive model for her students. She is a lifelong learner and continues to elevate her practice and share her knowledge equally and without hesitation, focusing on safety and the best developmentally appropriate practices. She stimulates and encourages curiosity, engagement, and creative play. Her upbeat attitude inspires her class and school family, and we are so happy and proud to honor her today. So if we could just give her a round of applause. So for our classified Point of Pride, Michelle Brennan, would you please come forward? So excited for you. All right, so Michelle joined the front office team at Cooley back in 2019. She has been a blessing right from the start. She quickly learned the ins and outs of the position, has been a true asset to our Cooley school family. Her smile and sunny attitude brighten every day, and she has a wonderful sense of humor. She loves all the children and has made a special effort to get to know the names of our stars and our best students, to greet them by name every day. She's part of our social committee, treating our staff to special birthday greetings and treats. She is very organized and very creative, but I knew she was going to be During our interview, she told us she has 10 children. And so we immediately knew how organized this lady would be. And she did not disappoint. In fact, almost all of them are here today to congratulate their mother. Yay, we're so happy. Thank you. Let me get a picture. And next, we have our volunteer from Cooley, Brandy Krause Johnson. Will you please come forward, please? Okay, so we're very excited and very proud that Brandy Krause Johnson stepped into the position of PTO president just this past November. And she rescued us, and she's actually helping to keep our wonderful ECDC PTOs afloat during this school year. So Brandy has been a wonderful breath of fresh air, offering idea after idea to inspire and take care of my teaching staff and bring joy to the children. Since this is her last year in preschool, she has been very busy recruiting other parents to volunteer for open board positions and committees. So she wants to make sure that we're not in the position that we found ourselves in this year. She's a lot like the Energizer Bunny, so full of energy and ready to get the job done. I barely had the idea figured out in my head, and she's asking how she can make it happen, which is so refreshing and wonderful. She is always focused on the positive, and yes, we can do that seems to be her motto. We are very proud and excited to honor her with our Points of Pride this year. And then we would like to recognize our student. Nico, will you come forward, please? Nico, come on up. Oh my goodness. This is Nico Patel, and he is a student in Mrs. Campazano's PM class this year. And Mrs. C was very excited to nominate him for Points of Pride. Nico is a very kind friend, building relationships with his peers daily. Nico's smile is so bright, it shines right through his mask as he connects with his class and school family. See, you can tell right now. He is always willing to wait, take a turn, and share with his friends. He continuously seeks out new learning opportunities and shares his interests with his teachers and his friends. Some of his interests include fish, the sea, and rainbows. Nico has a love for math, numbers, construction, and engineering. It has truly been a pleasure watching Nico play, learn, and grow this school year and the other years he's been with us too, because this will be Nico's final year at Cooley Preschool. Off to kindergarten he will go, and what a gift he will be. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Patel, for sharing Nico with us. Hold on, I got something for you. Can you hold that? Yes. Perfect. We're going to go like this. And then over here, we're going to do one more. Is that okay? Yes. Yay. Okay, we got this. Okay, take this too. There you go. All right. All done. All right, next it's Sasebo. All right, so our certified, oh, and I got my speeches too. All right. I wrote them down this year because I was afraid that, yes. Okay, I'm going to give you that. Okay. So our certified staff member that we're honoring today is Sarah Splickle. Sarah, come on up. So Sarah is our speech therapist at Sasebo ECDC. She has worked in our district for 12 years and opened Sasebo Preschool with us in 2013. Sarah is considered a communication specialist around preschool. She is the ultimate professional as she interacts with students and staff, and she was truly born to teach preschool. At any time in the classroom, you'll see her singing and playing with her students as she works on speech and communication goals. And everyone loves the way she tells a story, using all kinds of different voices for the characters and reading with such expression. Everyone is captivated. And even you, Dr. Foley, you really enjoy it too, I know. So when we had to close last March and begin online instruction, Sarah immediately was starting to research the best ways to reach and teach her students. When we started the new school year, she was ready. She had created a green screen in her office to make her lessons interactive and fun for the children. She is one in a million, and we are proud to recognize her tonight. So our classified Points of Pride is Amy Kimball. Amy, come on up. So Amy was a substitute teacher for us for many years before she decided and came to me and said, I'd love a full-time position in preschool. This is where I want to be. So we actually had her start this year as the paraprofessional in our Spanish classroom over at Sasebo. Well, our Spanish teacher left suddenly back in October, and without a teacher, we had to move all of Amy's children into the other kinder prep classrooms. Well, she responded so quickly, helping those children to adjust to their new classrooms. She developed a schedule to help support the full-day kinder prep teachers with her students in those classrooms. And then she even created a schedule and found time to pull them from those classes to do their Spanish lessons with them, so they got to continue to do that, which has been such a blessing. She has spread joy and positivity in every situation and every classroom, and she has enjoyed seeing all the different teaching styles and has learned so much from being able to observe everyone. She is loved by the entire staff and all the students. She truly deserves the Points of Pride recognition tonight. Thank you. And next, we get to honor Patty Lamb for our volunteer of Points of Pride for this school year. Yay. Okay, so Patty Lamb is currently our PTO vice president. She gives endlessly of her time and talent for our ECDC staff and students. She is willing to do anything we ask of her and happily works behind the scenes to get everything accomplished. Sometimes she's in and out so quickly that I think she operates in stealth mode because we hardly ever see her, but everything is done. She loves our school so much and is so dedicated to our students and her own students, her own children and our staff, that she travels from Gold Canyon to Sasebo because her son is in our Think Gifted program over there. So every day, oh, hello, yes. So she does all of this with amazing kindness and humbleness, and she is very deserving of this award. And then last but not least, Hannah, will you come on up, please? She is our student point of pride from Sasebo Preschool. So Hannah von der Linden is a student in Mrs. Stahl's Think Highly Gifted Academy at Sasebo Preschool, and an absolute joy. She approaches each day with a smile and an eagerness to learn. She's only 4.5, but don't let her size fool you. She has a maturity level that is well beyond her age. She is kind and helpful to everyone and puts the needs of others before her own. She is sensitive to her classmates' feelings and finds ways to include others. Hannah stands out as a role model for the other students in the classroom, always showing patience and looking for the best in others. She brightens the days of her friends and her teachers with her warm personality and smile that shines through her eyes. She is truly one of a kind. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. von der Linden, for the gift of your daughter this year. This is for you. We got one more present. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share today.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Gleason and Mrs. Utley. We always like to let the audience know at this time that while we would love for you to stay for the meeting, we don't want you to feel obligated to do so. So if you need to leave, feel free to do so at this time. President Reese, members of the board, as our preschool friends leave so quietly, we'll continue. They're so quiet. I have some upcoming events, and I'm actually excited about a couple of these upcoming events we want to make you aware of. So the first thing, obviously, is we are on the verge of spring break, and we are happy to share that we are on the verge of a very different spring break than we were last year. As you know, communication will go to families, encouraging them to enjoy their break, but also to help us keep our schools safe and mitigation strategies stay strong, because we look forward to returning and finishing this year very strong. And we're real proud of our community, our students, our employees for everything they've done together during this time. So that's one of the things we are happy about. The other one is something cool that has come up. So this past Saturday, we have had this on our agenda for a while. This March 31st, there's this good governance event. And this past Friday, Mrs. Reach and I had an opportunity to work with Sarah Watts to plan this event. And we're actually very excited about this event, because on this day, we're going to be hosting with the Gilbert Chamber of Commerce, with a group of business individuals, a good governance event. And it will be hosted through a Zoom platform. But what we're excited about is in developing this agenda with Sarah and the business chamber businesses that'll be part of this. We're literally going to have rooms where we're going to set, it says we'll go 2 by 2, including myself. So for instance, myself and Mrs. Anderson might be setting up as a group, and we'll have a Zoom room. Each of you would have a Zoom room. You'll have also cabinet members in there, but we're going to have conversations with our business community. One of the things we've been talking about is our strategic plan. We've been talking about portrait of a graduate. We're talking about what are the desired skills and abilities that we want our graduates to have. This is going to be the conversation that we as governing board engage our local businesses in these Zoom rooms. So each of you will have a set of questions and an agenda. Again, we just talked with Sarah on Friday. She is on spring break, but sent us the agenda this morning. And it will be at 8 a.m. And we will provide more information to you, but the setup of this is going to be a really great opportunity for the Higley District leadership to work with our business community as we go into other events coming up in the month, because you'll notice the month of April, we've got lots of meetings. We've got 2 regular meetings, and we also have a retreat in which we talk about our goals and plans and those kind of things. So we'll have had an opportunity to talk with our business community and their thoughts and feelings about those things as we engage in that conversation next. So some exciting things to look forward to for the next month here. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
President Reese, can I ask a question real quick?
Yes, Mrs. Anderson.
I apologize if you said this. Will there be any teachers or a part of this? I didn't hear.
Good question. So we work, and this is one of the very first school districts to do this way in a Zoom session. Normally, this is the governing board having a conversation or leadership with business and community members. So this will be something we have lots of dialogue and conversation about, but those who are member of the chamber who come to these conversations, and we're just happening to be hosting it with them. And this will be the first Zoom one like this. Normally they have breakfast where we come and we highlight and we do a presentation. The structure of this one, the agenda that we started with, looks more like there will be a message from SRP. There's some business people who are part of the chamber, and those who can attend will learn a little bit about our new board members, your new board, your new district leadership, and the fact that we are working on an agenda with them to have a dialogue with that audience. We'll obviously have multiple audiences and groups that would be part of hearing this, but this allows us to talk to the Town of Gilbert's business commerce group around this topic. Mm-hmm.
And it's a really good event, attended by a lot of just local businesses as well as larger corporations, and it's a good way for us to share where we're at, what we're doing, and kind of what our vision is, and it's a good way for businesses to help us stay on top of what they're looking for from a workforce. So at that point, that information's gathered, and then we see what we can do to take back. So,
President Reese, members of the board, in fact, one of the questions it'll allow us to do is what kind of opportunities do they have in their businesses that we may not know about that we should be aware of, so that we can bring it back to our leadership, to our teachers when we're looking at how do we build and grow these partnerships. So the chamber is a city group that is business leaders, and this is a bridge to talk from leadership to leadership and then build upon. So
thank you. All right, then we will go on to board comments. Anyone have any board comments? Not a lot happening. I did have the opportunity, Williamsfield, Winter Guard, and Drumline hosted a Higley only event for their winter lines, their Winter Guards, drum lines, winter winds, things like that. So they did host a Higley district only event so that the kids could have the opportunity to perform. And it was really neat to go and see again since the entire season last year was canceled. So it was nice to see those kids really work, and they enjoyed performing. So,
Reese? I did actually, via Zoom or some form of live stream, get parts of the Higley choir performance. And if anybody knows the history of choir within our district, the program has just busted out. And the whole stage was full of children, and it was great to see. Even in masks, you could hear and understand them. It was very well done. And what is kind of neat, again, there's not a lot of great things coming out of COVID, but I could sit home in my jammies and watch it. And so it was really great.
Mrs. Wilson?
I actually did see the orchestra concert for the littles. I got to go to one, and it was kind of nice to, it was just families, and they were on their own benches in their masks, and they did a good job. I want to applaud our families for listening and just really taking it to heart that this is the only way they're going to get these events. And they did. They listened, and I just want to thank all the families who decided to come out in this scary time to watch their kiddos. And our orchestra program at the elementaries, they are doing so well, and I can't even imagine that these kids, some of them have only had really two quarters to perform. One quarter was online, but then 2 real quarters to work on these songs, and they play so well. It was very fun to see these littles work so hard on music, and just to see the program grow from where it started, because this is only a 3 or 4 year old program, and it was really nice to see.
Seeing and listening and hearing all of these performances, and that we're moving, not to normal yet, but moving in a direction. But I think the biggest part for me is, even with the masks and everything else, these kids are lighting up performing. I mean, it's so important to them, and they are just thrilled and are willing to do and sing with the masks on and do whatever they can so that they can perform. And so it's really nice to hear about our performing arts, and that we're getting concerts and assemblies and everything going again. So because you can see it in their face, that it means so much to them. So thank you for everyone following what we're asking them to, so we can continue to do this. I know we will continue to do more and add more. All those conversations are happening. So thank you for following the guidance and suggestions and the requirements on our campuses. So, all right, Mrs. Reach, do we have any requests to speak? Okay. Then we'll go on to our consent agenda, and I move that we approve our consent agenda as it's presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments on consent? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 5-0.
And just a little note, President Reese, thanking again for the gifts and the donations. I see that it was a preschool PTO donating balance beams, and again, Maricopa donating. That's a little stretch of a gift, but still. We appreciate our PTO so much that do so much for our schools.
Thank you for pointing that out. All right, we're going to go on to our informational items, and so we are on 7.1 for our summer school update.
All right, President Reese, members of the board, cabinet, community, we're excited to give you an update this evening on summer school. And somebody just said a lot of good things didn't come out of COVID, but I'm going to say we got some funding here and we're going to use it. So, next slide. Tonight, we're going to share some information with you about credit recovery, PE, boost courses, and of course, elementary, my favorite. All right, credit recovery, our main focus is for these kids that have failed 1 or more courses to recover that credit, to get them back on track, to graduate on time, and fill in those gaps. Like I just mentioned, we're going to use ESSER 3 funds to cover the cost of summer school. These are all in person, and we strongly believe in person is the way to go. Some of these kids have been online, and it's been tough. So we know smaller groups of kids, feedback from teachers, and intentional targeted focus on areas of struggle make that difference. So you'll see these classes are free. They're held at Higley High School. There's 2 sessions, Monday through Thursday, 7:30 to 11:30 each day. These are the courses that are offered. They're for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. Sometimes kids might be in Algebra 1, pass semester 1, and not pass semester 2. So they will have an opportunity in session 2 to recover that credit. I think that's important because maybe in a lot of cases, it might have been reversed. Because I wasn't in person that first quarter, I had some gaps. I didn't do so well, but then I caught up. So we're going to get them in shape to move forward. I think this is an amazing program because it is free, and we're going to get very highly qualified teachers to support our kids.
Mrs. Richards, is it just for Fs, or if somebody maybe in 9th grade got a C second semester of their world history and they wanted to up that grade for possible scholarship opportunities, are they allowed to do that?
Dr. Foley, yes. That's a very good question, so I'm glad you asked that because other people would have had the same one. All right. Next slide. All right, we do offer PE, and this is for credit, and that's why we charge for this course. A lot of our kids are planning ahead. They want to get this credit out of the way so that they have more opportunities during the school year. It costs $250. It's also in person at Higley High School. It's a 3-week session. The dates are the 7th through the 24th. The hours are 7:30 to 11:30. And then our boost classes are for kids that need possibly some front loading, is what I would call it, or maybe a little remediation going into 7th grade or going into their freshman year of algebra. This is specifically related to math, and they selected math because sometimes those foundational concepts are where our kids struggle. So if we have gaps in math, we're in trouble. You know, ELA spans across the globe, in my opinion, K-12, but math, if they have some concepts they didn't get or they learned it incorrectly, we've got to get in there and help them be successful in middle school and high school. Heather Jones is our administrator for these courses being offered at Higley High School. One thing elementary's doing is we're going over data very closely and putting it in some Excel spreadsheets, which will help these recommendations that will go forward for kids to help them qualify or know about these courses. So I'm excited about that. There's no cost, no credit. I like their name Boost, but I like our elementary name. Wait till you hear that. Anyway, it's a 3-week session, same hours. We are going to be able to offer transportation for kids that need it, and breakfast and lunch. So that's good. There are some benefits to this crazy pandemic. All right, when you think about elementary, traditionally we've offered summer school for our Title I campuses, and those are Gateway, Chaparral, and Power Ranch. We're going to continue to do that, but this year we get to expand it, and I'm really excited because I know we have some learning loss due to this pandemic. Go all the way back to a year ago this time when everything blew up, all the way through September 8th. So Miss Felicia Malloy is going to help hire these teachers, and it's scheduled for the 2 weeks in June of the 7th through the 18th. Our hours are 7:45 till noon. Transportation's available for elementary kids, as well as breakfast and lunch. lunch is going to look like when you're done learning, grab your lunch and you can go. We're going to have to teach them not to eat on the bus. So anyway, Matthews Crossing is going to help provide snacks. Staffing at elementary will include a health aide / secretary, somebody that's trained, so we don't lose the ground we've covered this year with all of these safe practices, and then a lead teacher to assist with administrative duties. Advertising for this will begin in April. All right. Just like I said, we're extending this to all campuses this year. We worked this week. It's been a long week. We worked yesterday to start drilling down on our data to see which of our kids are going to benefit from this opportunity. We're going to use Chaparral, Power, and probably Gateway, but we're going to have to see the numbers of kiddos we have. One of the biggest challenges is to make sure we have teachers. So thank goodness, I think we have an opportunity for our teachers that have worked so hard this year. Not only will they get an hourly rate, they're going to get a stipend on top of that. So hopefully we'll have more than enough teachers because I don't want to turn around children. Miss Amanda Day, the Dean of Chaparral, is helping us with all the paperwork and communication, and Curtis helped design the logo, and the name of the elementary summer school is Schools In for Summer. And we have a really cute logo for that. Pretty much the same information there. We're going to focus on ELA and math. And like I said, those stipends probably are going to hopefully make our teachers know how valued they are.
Thank you, Mrs. Richards. I know that this, the Boost classes are excellent. My own daughter took it. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that it is really helpful to those struggling in mathematics, making those jumps from, especially I thought for her, my daughter, middle school to high school was a big jump. And it was a great program. So I'm glad we've kept Boost.
President Reese, Board Member Kaler, thank you for sharing that. One of the things we're excited about is, one of the things we're learning is that ESSER 3 is going to require that a percentage of this go toward learning loss. I expect, last year, if you remember, the governor and in the budget, there was an incentive for summer school. And that isn't there this year, but the expectation is that you use ESSER for this. And so what's really nice is that we will have, if there is K-12, or if you've got a need for remediation, recovery, enrichment, support, you will have a free opportunity with transportation to take something this summer to support you. And we will use our ESSER funds to do that. And this one time we have this additional funding, we will use it as an incentive to encourage our wonderful teachers for their time, for providing this opportunity, because our hope is that we have more participate in this than we have historically had. So we're excited to be able to provide this opportunity and get the information out there so that those who are interested, we can get it staffed, we can get transportation ready to go, and have something great for our community and our students this summer.
Can I ask a question? Is that okay? Is there a plan in place, just in case, I hope not, but if a student needs to quarantine, will they be able to watch anything online to keep on task and maybe finish either of the programs, credit recovery, Boost, whatever it is, or just so that they can have the opportunity?
So they have that opportunity. We can work on that because we have Canvas, but we weren't going to go both ways with it, if it makes sense. I think I'm going to hope that's not happening because I know they need that interaction, but we can definitely work on a plan if they're out. So
Just, I mean, if they make it so far and it's just like a week left or, a
Yeah.
few days left, it'd be great if,
Yeah, you don't want to punish them.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Every day we have about 15 new questions, so it's like, okay, we forgot, or we didn't think of that, so.
President Reese, Board Member Anderson, and I think there's a difference too. When we're talking about credit recovery, there's multiple platforms that we could modify and work with the student on. When it's enrichment to support, what it may look like is a communication with the parent and resources. It won't have the same interaction opportunity, but certainly we're being very intentional to look at our data to identify students who would benefit from that. So we'll make sure that we do whatever we can, because following those mitigation plans, and if you're not feeling well, we would not want you to come to summer school. So we would want to, everything that we have learned about how to mitigate during the school year will be alive and well in our protocols and expectations in our summer classrooms.
President Reese.
Mrs. Wilson?
Quick question, I'm sorry, I did not send this prior. Elementary, will they get the same opportunity if, let's say, the kid is getting a C in a class and they want to come in, the parent wants them to come in, are they going to be able to? Or is it just going to be failing kids? Just like Mrs. Kaler said for the high school, will it be open for elementary? Or
We're going to do everything we can to support all kids.
Okay.
I'm just going to be honest, I got to get teachers first. That's my
Yes.
first. And the applications actually went out today. So we're asking that the teachers get their applications in by the Monday after spring break. So the answer is I don't want to turn any kid away.
Thank
just
you.
like the kid with the C.
Yeah,
you know?
if the parent
But-
feels that the kid could,
We'll do everything we can.
can.
That's how I'm going to answer it.
that sounds like a great answer, thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, and considering we're looking at this as a learning loss, I mean, the grade doesn't always reflect everything that
Right.
they haven't learned, so they may be passing, but that they did have a loss of learning there. And Mrs. Anderson, thank you for that question. I think that will be difficult because it's a 3-week time frame, and the time that you would have to quarantine, and with it being the purpose of trying to catch them up. But I think looking into our different options is a good idea, and reiterating more so the importance of following social distancing, masks, and not just when you're at school, because we have found and we know that the majority of the kids that are contracting COVID is not happening on our campuses. So, keep our fingers crossed. We're here to try and help kids catch up, make up a deficit, something that they missed. And it's 3 weeks. It's like, keep our fingers crossed, and please help us get through 3 weeks to try and help these kids catch up a little bit.
Thank you for making us think ahead, though.
All right, any other questions regarding our summer school update? All right, then we will move on to our salary schedules.
Good evening. I think I have to move that a little closer. Good evening, President Reese, members of the board, my fellow colleagues, as well as our community. Tonight, I'm here to discuss our salary schedules and our pay rates for our different employee groups. Next slide, please. So in addition to the salary schedules, we've also going to be talking about supplementals, and we're going to be looking at them at all of our employee areas, so our certified, our administrators, our classified, supplementals, and substitute pay. One area we are not addressing tonight is our educational professionals, and that includes our psychologists, our OTs, occupational therapists, our speech-language pathologists, or speech-language therapists. I have to make sure that I spell out those alphabetical words, alphabet soup. And the reason for that is because of the fact that they were our most recent group of employees that went through our reclassification and compensation project, which I'll talk a little bit more about, in which we were able to really look at a competitive increase for them, as well as competitive changes into their salaries and the salary bases that we had. So to give you a little bit of history and context, because we do have 2 members of the board who weren't here at the time that we looked to do this. In the fall of 2018, the district joined with 7 other school districts in the East Valley to compromise and go out, not compromise, pardon me, to come together and go out for a RFP in regards to our request for proposal related to a classification and compensation study. So these are common within organizations, particularly in education and human resources, because at some point when you look at your job classifications and your salary schedule, sometimes you have to address, are we paying equitably? Have we addressed any pay compression that might be going on? And the impotence for this was because of Prop 206 that had occurred and been passed in November of 2016, which not only had a piece in relation to sick leave for employees, but also in terms of minimum wage, where the state of Arizona was going to see an almost $4 increase within a 4-year period of time. So not only districts, but certainly private employers were going to have to look and address this challenge. For Higley, a large component of that for us was, prior to my arrival, our pay schedule, particularly for our classified, most of our employees were making under $12 an hour. So if you were going to look at addressing in 4 years going up to $12 an hour with approximately at the time 700 and some employees, you were going to hit salary compression to where you probably had employees who'd been here at the district 4, 5+ years who weren't making $12 an hour, to individuals right off the bat needing to address that $12 an hour. And that wasn't something that we could look to do on our own in terms of manpower, as well as the fact really needing to find somebody who could look at the scope of other labor markets within the state of Arizona, and additionally expertise in other areas within our region too. And through that, we interviewed 3 different organizations. JB Rewards was the organization that rise to the top and had done work within education on the West Coast, as well as in healthcare. In terms of cost and scope of project, had experience in which all of us pooling our resources together and the different dollars that we had that made sense in the bigger picture. And so some of the things I already talked about, and the main reason why we did this was to look at our inequities, our pay compression, and really the structures in which that existed. And like I said, the impetus of it was our hourly employees. However, as we took advantage of it, we also knew we had to take a look at our administrators, our educational professionals, and our supplementals. We did not specifically look at our other certified in regards to our teachers because of the fact of Governor Ducey's 20x20 plan. We had done a lot of work in moving the base rate of our teacher salaries. And the time that I've been here, and what you're about to see later tonight in today's presentation, you'll see that it's our 3rd, if not 4th time in about 5 years that the teacher-based salary has increased. So, next slide, please. So looking at our certified, as I said, we did not have it as part of our larger project in relation to this class and compensation area. However, we did know that if we were going to stay competitive, particularly around the fact of the governor's 20x20 plan, we also had to take a look at these areas. So just recently, within the last year, we did increase our teacher certified from 40 to 41,000. So tonight you're seeing that we're looking at increasing our teacher, our school counselors, and our district coaches by 2.5%, which will then be those recommended changes that you're noticing. And the reason for this is because of the fact that, again, if we're going to look to recommend, which is coming up later today in action, a 5% increase based on the conversations that Mr. Moore as well as Mr. Gadd has presented in our M&O budget over the course of the last few board meetings, we do need to take a look at these areas so that way we could look at, again, distinguishing that pay compression from our first individuals in coming on board with us to individuals who have some time with us. And some people refer to it as also kind of a loyalty tax. I tend to say internal equity because of the fact that we want to view the individuals that have been with us and their time and value the time that they have spent their tenure and have chosen us. You see differences. Some of this is because it's been modeled within Higley. Certainly before my time here, I'm on my 4th school year. I can't identify how far back it goes, but I certainly understand that it goes back at least a couple years before I arrived, where there were different base rates for these different groups. So we just continued in that area. Our school counselor and our district instructional coaches actually have not been addressed as part of the governor's 20 by 20 plan because they did not fall within that area. But historically, because they had higher rates, we didn't address them also. But it is time to look at that as we look at other components related to our certified. Other items I want to note is that our school counselors, they do have the opportunity to get an additional 15 days of pay at their daily rate. Particularly at the high schools, we utilize our school counselors for our master schedule. There's some dynamic of that at the middle school too. So they do come on board, help with various things, and we pay them their daily rate as a result. Our teachers, our continuing teachers, our school counselors, and our district coaches, let me rephrase that. Our continuing teachers, our school counselors, if they're returning, they're on 186-day contracts. Our district coaches and our new employees are 190-day contracts. And the reason why our district coaches are always on 190 is because of the fact that they are heavily involved with new employee orientation in that first week prior to starting the school year. And we utilize them to really help support our new teachers in modeling good practices, best practices, procedures, practices within the district. And we need them for that. And that's why they're on longer contracts as a result also. Next slide, please. So modeling our 2.5% recommendation, you'll see that not only here, but in the other schedules that we present in terms of the classified, we looked at our administrators and professional exempt. And again, when we did this and we implemented it, it all seems like a long time ago, but really it was actually only a year ago for formal implementation this past July 1. When you take a look at it, at the time when we embarked on this project, we had a number of meetings, and for some of you that were on the board, remember that we did multiple updates in relation to the project, where we're at, where we're going, and what we're doing. A lot of you may or may not recall that I shared that based on budget, in terms of planned capacity, we looked at a 40 to 45 percentile increase for our different employee groups, because that's what we could afford. So we implemented our project as a result of that 40-45% costing for us with our current employees. And so our schedules and everything else reflected that. What we've learned and what has been great with Mr. Moore and Mr. Gadd is that we have additional budget capacity, as they have mentioned in our previous presentations with our M&O, in which we have the ability to look to increase these, and we need to stay competitive. Something that I learned as we were looking to address these schedules, Mr. Vance Jacobson, who is the project team lead for our JB reward system, has actually been brought back to the East Valley because there's some other school districts within the seven that participated, and then we're in addition to that, which makes 8, felt as though they went conservative on their salary schedules and what they implemented. So he's actually been back reassessing some of those other districts and the salary schedules they have for some of their positions, and then shared with me as a result that if we want to stay competitive, we're going to have to address our schedules a little bit more too. We certainly know and understand in terms of size for our comparable districts, we're larger and we're growing with some, and others we're never going to match up to in terms of who surrounds us. So budget capacity always has to be taken into consideration in what we have and the dollars that we get per student. However, the reality is they are still our competitors because they are next door to us, and although we may not be able to hit their percentiles or hit their rates, we have to do our best to make sure we stay as competitive as we can. In addition to pay, also looking at what other benefits or what other things can we offer in terms of value to keep our employees with us or to attract individuals to come to Higley. And in the time period that I've been here, I think we've done a great job in terms of what we've done and what we've put out there and how we've handled things to where I think Higley's being recognized as a district of choice or a district that individuals want to come and work for. And I'm hearing that in lots of different levels, certainly in the searches that we've done, but also also, as individuals have shared with us through colleagues that they've working with at other places and other committees outside of Higley. Like Higley's doing great things, and, we're keeping our eyes on that. So that's wonderful to hear. Next slide, please.
Ms. Martins, real quick, can I just ask, on the previous slide, we also determined that people pretty much were coming in at the midpoint no matter what, and that kind of threw off the salary schedule. And this kind of addresses that, does it not?
Yes, it does. Not so much at the midpoint. What we discovered was that for lack of a better word, the practices weren't consistent. So we discovered, to no fault of any of us currently, and there had been people who brought in at ranges and salaries that we couldn't explain. When you then looked at internal individuals who'd been with the district longer, maybe had more experience. So that was something that was confusing, as well as the fact that we did have people who were brought in at the midpoint of the salary schedule, but then when you looked at, again, why compared to other individuals, it didn't make sense. And then when I came on board, and the practice that I was using based on the salary schedules that existed, looking at experience, looking in other areas, not knowing, not having gone back to research the history of some of our current employees and their experiences and what they were brought in at, discovered that there was a large discrepancy in terms of what I had offered based on what I could tell as experience, degree, impact versus what had been previously done. So that is correct.
Thank you.
Next slide, please.
President Reese, members of the board, one of the things I think is important that we also talk about is that tonight when we're talking, this is an information item and this is addressing salary schedule. So obviously we're talking about a budget, we're talking about increases, potential increases. That is for this year. This is looking at these salary schedules, and you will be looking at these and voting on them on April 7th. So this is an information item. But one of the things is when you address the salary for right now, you also have to look at what the schedules look like to align with, to be part of whatever you do for a salary decision. And I think the mom is kind when she says we coined the term co-opetition. We're in co-opetition with other districts because we cooperate and we collaborate, but we're looking for the same, we're going after the same high quality employees. So it's important to, within our range, stay competitive and keep our salary schedules updated as whatever we do with any salary decision we make, our salary schedules have to be part of that piece. So we kind of do one and then the other.
No, thank you, Dr. Foley. That is very important to note in this bigger picture, that this is an information item for you guys to process, and that we will come back. We listened and heard from previous meetings that you like an opportunity to hear the information, process and reflect on it, and then be able to vote at it at a different time. So we understand the importance of it. And it is different in the sense that tonight, later, you'll be voting on continuing employees, where this is for anybody new coming to the district. That'll take effect July 1 of 2021 for our fiscal 2021-2022 school year. So in regards to our classified non-exempt, we also did look at them too in terms of that 2.5 starting % to all of our starting rates that we have in all of our classifications and our grades. We're looking at just the schedule of pay right now. We do post on our website, and you have seen drafts of what we have in terms of what grades and positions match and align, so you can see where they would fall. If looking at, for example, a bus driver or classified administrative assistant or anything along those lines, and if we were to go back and talk about the administrators and the exempt positions, you'll see where those fall within those grades also. So one thing I do want to note, which is unfortunate, but something we might need to consider, and I would like to give the board a heads up, is that, we did a lot of good work in regards to what we did moving this direction and creating a new salary schedule that provided competitive, in my opinion, competitive rates in terms of grades and steps. And this year, our employees, which is wonderful, we are looking at 5% for our classified too, even though you are recommending for our administrators and our certified and our educational professionals tonight. We'll come back in that April meeting, that first April 7th meeting, to make a recommendation for our classified that would also recommend that 5%, which I do have to say is wonderful, because in the 10 that I have been here, our classified has not seen the same percentage as our other employee groups. And certainly 5% for them is different than 5% for our other employee groups, but to be able to see that the same numbers being used consistently across the board is actually huge. And I think they'll see that and value that in the bigger picture. But going back to what I wanted to say was that we may have to reassess whether or not we can continue to operate on a grade and step system, or we may need to look at whether we go to ranges or quartiles for our classified, because it's quite likely beyond this year we're unlikely to provide certain percentages that were built within the step and grade system based on budget. So don't want to be surprised if we look to change that a little bit up more in the future. Our next slide is our supplementals. And this is an interesting area. I certainly know right when I arrived, I was approached by a number of people in terms of our supplementals and what we offer and what we do, and understanding that, as well as the fact that Dr. Fowler, through having previously been the athletic director, tried to work with my predecessor and looking at this and seeing whether or not we could change processes and systems up. Unfortunately, at the times, even though certainly not from us not trying to champion it, we just, when it came to the bigger picture in terms of our budget and spending, weren't able to be successful at changing or increasing any of these. So it's been a minimum of 5 years since these have been addressed, potentially more. Again, I can't speak to that since that was prior to my tenure. So really kind of changing our models completely. So this is not just a 2.5%. This is actually looking beyond what we had previously had in regards to what we had was formulaic based on an old base salary of $36,000. So like I said, it had to have been at least 5+ years, as when I started here, the district salary for teachers was $38,000. And getting comments of people not understanding, well, why is it not based on 38,000 and it's 36, although it says it's based on a base salary? So we had to look at changing language to help people understand, you know, yes, at one point it was a base salary, but now what we're saying it's based on a factor from 36,000 and addressing that. But through the work, again, I can't say enough about Mr. Gadd and Mr. Moore in regards to what they've helped us do and what they've been able to realize for the district. We understand that we can model this differently. And this model of these levels and steps actually are comparable to 3 other districts around us. I think I shared this before through a status report, but I'd like to share again too. Mr. Jacobson, as part of his class and comp study, actually was requested to do this for 2 of the larger districts in our area, because they had had models that had not been reviewed and looked at, and/or models that really were going to need to shift because of growth that they were anticipating. So he was kind enough to share this data with all of us, even though we didn't specifically ask for this. So I was able to work with him to identify levels in which we, being what I would describe a mid-sized school district, and what could be competitive for us, and then shifting our different groups, like our coaches, our spirit line areas, again, athletics as well as activities, student council, yearbook, robotics, et cetera, to where they could align with this. We are going to have to do some more work, and there's going to be other layers here, as most of what we've offered, I'm not changing that model yet, because there could be other budgetary impacts that we don't know about. I know some questions had come up in regards to, are we interested in expanding the number of items that we have? And again, that's a larger conversation in which we'll have to involve finance as well as Mr. Lotzenheiser in terms of the director of secondary and our athletic directors at the sites, so that way they can be part of the conversation in terms of where our priorities need to be. But I think it's great that we're able to look at a different model that I think those that have been with us for a long time coaching, whether it's our current teachers and or other individuals who've come to Higley interested in coaching for us to help us be competitive, will value in this process. So, the next slide, please. Leadership and department chair. I did specifically put this separate because it had been done separately back in 2016. The board had approved not only the number of leadership and department chair stipends that could be handed out, they also approved rates. You can see what those rates are because they have not changed since that time period. And putting these off of that other supplemental will have a larger budgetary impact. So looking at it and looking at a 2.5% increase, so then again, we're not going outside of what we think we can handle, but yet showing that we do understand and need to address there needs to be an increase, because 4 to 5 years of not seeing that certainly can raise questions. I also put on there, as Ms. Richards mentioned, we are looking for ESSER 3 money, looking at getting ESSER 3 money, and since that is one-time money, looking to do that for the supplementals for a one-time loss. We're still working on, I know we've identified a potential number that we think that we will attract those teachers who may want a long break, but this might attract them to want to come our way, and maybe instead of picking up something for the summer somewhere else, they'd be willing to teach a little bit more for us. So wanting to make sure that we do our best for our students, but also making sure that we do what's right for our employees in that process. And then our last slide. It has been an interesting year. A little year. I wanted to say year and a half, but year. Year in regards to our substitutes and our teacher coverage. Something great that we implemented this year, and certainly something that we wish to continue next year, but we know has a large budgetary impact, is the fact that we identified what we called these rescue subs. So at every school site, we had one or more. Our secondary schools have more rescue subs to help their full-time positions. So if individuals needed to be out because of quarantine or other reasons, they were able to be placed in classrooms to assist right on the spot. Additionally, we always still have our just subs in general that come in daily, but we needed to let our sites know, not only in terms of our employees and our teachers, but also our administration, that we're here to support you. But what we've learned in terms of the daily component is that we're all going back to this, the term that you had, Dr. Foley, which I can't remember, but co-opetition. Yes, that is a great term, co-opetition. We learned that large school districts, again, understanding they have larger budget capacity, raised their substitute daily rate as well as their long-term rate by $50 this year to attract substitutes to head their way because they were struggling, and much larger districts do struggle differently than we struggle, right? But again, going back to that co-opetition, they are going to leave us and go elsewhere. So I do think it's time we also address our our long-term rate. And something new that we have not done at Higley, but other school districts do, is that those employees that are their retirees, they offer the higher rate from the beginning, and not just offer them the flat dollar rate for any other area. So I think that will attract potential HUSD retirees to pick up sub-positions for us if they know that their daily rate will be that $145 right away versus building from whether it's the 100 currently or the 125, which ultimately will be the recommendation. So that will be helpful. And as well as teacher coverage. Teacher coverage, for those of you who don't understand what that term means, so when at the secondary level only, we try to find a substitute and we were unsuccessful in finding a substitute to cover a course or section, we then reach out to our current employees to see whether or not they'd be willing to give up their prep time to then cover that course. We have historically been paying $18 per session, I don't want to say per hour, but per class, per session, and looking to address that to be more competitive. And I did take a look at other comparable school districts around us and see that they did increase some of theirs too. Some of them are still around $17, $18 per section. Some of them have recently increased them again this year to reflect the other challenges that we've had this year. And so that $25 rate reflects a more competitive component for that, and something again that we have not addressed in my tenure here with the district. And then questions that you might have that I can address.
I just want to say thank you for doing all the hard work for this, looking at the budget, and possibly, depending on how vote goes, really motivating and showing value to the staff, especially after this year. So this is great. This is good to see. I've been there with the $18 coverage, and you might as well just give me a nickel. That stinks. So it's nice to see that there's a potential to increase that. So I appreciate everything.
Ms. Reese, I have one question. On the teacher coverage, you said that's just for secondary. So if an elementary teacher covers, then there's not any compensation for them, correct?
That is correct, and I will explain what I understand, and Ms. Richards can certainly elaborate on that. So at the secondary level, they teach 5 courses and have a prep time. At the elementary level, because they don't have different sections, you're with your course the whole time. Your prep time is typically their specials, which is class goes to, that's separate, and the teacher then works while their student is in specials. And so when a teacher doesn't show up and we don't have coverage, what ended up happening prior to COVID is that we would split the class. And so then if there's 4 sections of 4th grade and one teacher was unable to make it, then we take that 4th grade classroom that might house 25 to 30 students and distribute them amongst the other grade levels. And Ms. Richards, if there's something else to add to that.
This year, that's been a little challenging. That's why the rescue subs have come to the rescue. And they've been good about sharing, because if Coronado needed one, then sometimes Gateway would send theirs. The other thing we have, and we don't like doing this, but if we have to, we have lit coaches that can cover, and our gifted coaches, and we've sent our district coaches to support this year. So it wasn't a good year for us to divide kids up and mix them in, so we've improvised. So it's worked out.
So in a normal year, then the teachers in elementary school are still getting a break, then what you're saying?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so that's
Correct.
why.
Yes, they don't have that 5 courses in a prep time. They are all day with the classroom. However, they get a break during when they're going to specials. And you can't divide, you can't have them be pulled in a different area like you can at the secondary level.
And just so I could really fast understand, rescue subs, there always are rescue subs?
Well, this year was the first year that we implemented them, but we are going to advise that we continue them for next year, and then we'll have to continue to assess from there, because certainly, as you've noticed and paid attention to our quarterly reports with ESI, our sub-budget and our cost for them has, risen quite extremely.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Is there still the school budget, like site budget, that they only have so many dollars for sub-use? Is that still in place?
No, Ms. Anderson. So it all runs together, but I believe my second year with the district, so 18-19, through the meet and confer process, we decided to look at subs as a big picture across the district and not per site. So you are correct that previously, for lack of a better word, that sub-budget was kind of divided by site, and they were told they have X number of dollars that they could utilize for subs. And unfortunately, right or wrong, each site then implemented that in their own way, which came to become challenges in a bigger picture. So through long discussions, we said, our teachers are professionals. They'll make decisions that are best and what's needed. As a district, when we looked at our total budget expenditure, we weren't spending it total. Some sites certainly needed the subs more than other sites. And so let's look at a bigger picture. We would still behind the scenes keep an idea of how much we would quote-unquote allocate per site, but really looking at the larger picture of the budget. So if one school, let's say a secondary school, started to run up a little bit, we would then call them up and say, hey, just so you know, you're spending this much money in sub areas, and just wanted to give you a heads up because it's a lot more than you've typically have spent and or what might have been traditionally allocated to you. In that same process, what we did was we actually revisited our quote-unquote blackout calendar, and we really changed that to where we were only focused on areas that we felt really needed to have all of our employees here, and other areas that had previously been, I think before each holiday, every Wednesday, to where there was probably a good chunk of blackouts each month. We went to a model in which we're only doing blackouts during the month of July, November, and May, and that's it. Or in April, depending on the site in terms of testing that occurs. So the site would have to make that decision in terms of additional areas that was needed for their area. And so through a combination of doing both of that, we said, okay, we're going to look at a whole and not divide it up. So then one site doesn't tell their teams that you only get to use 2 days, and another site's not telling their teams that. So, and I check in every year, and it's been successful, and we've not seen any large concerns. So,
Mrs. Martins, I too want to echo what Ms. Anderson said, even reading from our strategic plan of our goal number 2.1, recruit, hire, and retain quality educators. 2.3, ensure staff feels valued and supported. And I think there's no better way than to somebody to feel valued and supported other than words of affirmation, if that's your love language, but also financially. And so I appreciate all the hard work that the whole team has done on behalf of Higley. And I hope that our community too is hearing all the good things coming from their support as well, supporting our staff. So again, thank you.
thank you, Ms. Kalar. But it's been the work, as you said, of the whole team, cabinet, other district administration, our collaborative processes with our certified, and I would be remiss if I did not say the work of the Human Resources and Payroll Department too. Absolutely.
Any other questions? Oh, thank you for, essentially it's a follow-up and continuation with looking at our salary schedules to ensure that we are where we're supposed to be and we can remain competitive. So thank you for being able to follow up now that COVID has allowed us to go back to that. So I appreciate it. All right, then we're going to move on to 7.3, which is a second review of our 2021-2022 capital outlay budget.
Madam President, members of the board, you have seen this capital outlay budget on one previous occasion. This is the second round of showing you this budget. It is the budget that's ongoing from the state. The state funds about $450 per student. It's an annual capital budget, and sometimes it funds less than that because the state has had a budget problem, and this is the first place that they'll go in which to balance their budget. So it's an easier one to do that rather than M&O. So the increase is significant from that where the current budget level is. It adds about 15-20% of additional funding that was removed from the formula back a few years ago when the state needed to, during the recession, when the state needed to balance its budget. The budget balance carry forward was significant, and we believe that was very significant, and it is kind of indicative of if you don't have a long-range plan and you just keep collecting this money and not allocating it to something, then we have a lesser effect on the students, the program. So we have taken the 16 million and reduced it to 8.6 with the budget that's shown here. And we think that given that we get about 6 million a year, we think 8.6 is probably an okay number to have. It's more than 100% of what we get annually from the state is new money. I would think most people would think that that's a much it's a much more defensible number than 16 million. It does offer a significant emphasis on technology. That's a 1-to-1 ratio of devices, and you heard that when Robert presented to you at the last meeting the technology plan. It reduces the M&O transfer from 4.4 million to 2.9 million. So we're trying to restore to M&O as much funding as we can. This is in general kind of capital items that we felt could be a transfer so that we would stop that transfer and use it directly to balance our M&O budget for next year. And we think, with the dollar amounts here, we think that's reasonable to do. For the first time, it does decentralize the furniture and equipment budget directly to schools. So this decentralization is the administrative staff and the teachers at each school receives monies to buy whatever their program requires. It's $10 a student. So it does provide some additional funds for library books. It's up to $40 a student for furniture and equipment. It's got 2 or 3 items in it that were not previously there, and I think, generally speaking, it takes the decision-making process directly to the school, rather than us deciding, well, I think we should buy telescopes, or I think we should buy a microscope, or whatever. It allows the individual campus to decide whether they need computers, whether they need whatever it is, and that, I think, it will be a more effective way in which to allocate that money.
Mr. Gadd, on that same note, I know that one of the areas that some of our teachers that I've heard may be struggling for items is our labs, our science departments. I know that many of our teachers have bought their own, Oreo cookies for their science project and whatnot. And, I just don't want to ever nickel and dime our teachers in that area. So having this now, I just hope that we get that information out to the schools and especially our science departments, that I know teachers were buying their own lab experiments when we weren't providing for it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I know that Sherry and David both have been active with the schools in telling them that they have this money on the way.
Dr. Foley, have our admin been receptive of the idea of having their own budgets?
President Reese, Vice President Wilson, one of the things I'm happy to share with you is that we had a general administrator meeting several weeks ago where we had an opportunity to talk with him about the work we've been doing with you as a governing board and talk about, again, more details for the presentations we've been doing here. And I will tell you that our administrative team was very pleased about that, feels that that'll be a very important thing. And we also talked about the fact that obviously there are still the things that the district is supposed to fund is still going to continue to fund, the curriculum and the resources, but this allows them to have a budget to address those specific needs that may not have been there before. So there was a very positive reception to this, and I thought that sounded great. The question was, how soon can that start?
Okay, in addition to this capital budget, the board will be applying, as it has in the past, for school facility board funding of various projects. And also using E-rate as it has in the past to enhance the technology program. So those 2 funds will supplement what you see here. So hopefully to the extent that the SFB has gotten more money in the last couple of years. That's the reason they can approve as many projects as they have, as the state is restoring money to them. So, the district should fare well with this one because of that restoration. Okay, and I wanted to mention one more thing. There's a dollar amount in here for curriculum adoption. It's fairly large, it's about $3 million. So now the district has the ability to start implementing a plan, deal with whatever textbook, whatever form that takes for future years. And that money hopefully will stay there then every year as an allocation amount to make sure that our curriculum is up to date in terms of its age.
And Mr. Gadd, if we didn't buy curriculum that year, would that be part of our rollover money?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next page. This is the summary that we've created from the detail, and you received a packet earlier at our first review with those page numbers in a larger document. They explain to you what those allocation amounts are intending to purchase. And we've covered, I think, a pretty adequate list of things in addition to providing some contingency if we need it. For an example, as I come down this list, about the second item in, is we've not allocated 1.5 million. Okay, so that's again a cushion for us to do whatever we need to do and find out whatever changes are coming about. We have enough money there to probably assign whatever amount we need. The building leases, you're familiar with those for the 2 middle schools. The technology plan was presented to you by Robert, and so was the $729,000 was in that plan. We do have a safety and security budget set aside of $65,000. It's primarily for cameras. So that's just to try to keep up with the needs that we have in that area. Major maintenance, Mr. Fowler, Dr. Fowler, and others will be administering that $1.7 million, along with the major project amounts that are also listed there in the $1.5 million. So we're in the neighborhood of well over $3 million of this budget being assigned to maintenance and major projects that we think need to be done. So we've allocated quite a bit of money to that side. We have to remember that without bond funding, then this budget will be the only support that they have. And so we want to be sure that the district annually includes enough maintenance money, especially to, I've had questions from voters before, is I spend all this money on the bond and you tell me you don't have any money to maintain it. That's not the answer that you want to give. So this hopefully avoids that. The $40 a student, I mentioned that earlier, that F&E allocation to the schools, that's almost $500,000. So they will be, they have quite a little sum of money in which to do some enhancing on their campus. The upkeep on equipment, that's again maintenance. Buses, there's $350,000 set aside in the current bond to keep the fleet up to date. That's over in the third column. The white fleet, we're beginning just now to have an ongoing allocation. We set aside $108,000. That's basically for trucks and vans and things like that don't seem to get a lot of attention over time. We have a $10 per student budget for library books. It's intended that each librarian would have, basically a list of books they believe that should be added to the collection at their school. They have this amount of money in which to work with. Fine arts, we put a line in here for primarily musical instruments. They're in bad shape, and we want to start a program to get them replaced. So we've set an allocation. It's at the district level, so we will review what the needs are at each school, and we think, I think rightfully so, we did not sign it on a per-student basis because my suspicion is some schools have adequacy and other schools have none. So we need to assign this based on need, and that's what it's here for. Moving on down, athletic equipment, an allocation for achievement and assessment, that's primarily software. I mentioned the curriculum adoption earlier, $2.9 million. Online Academy, we've got $55,000 set aside for equipping that. Carry forward, we're still pushing, even though we've got a lot of items in here, we are hopefully, and the math indicates that we will be pushing forward $8 million to next year. So we've built in a carry forward. It's not just hoping that everybody doesn't spend their budget and there's money left. This one forces a carry forward. So again, a conservative view of what we need to do to be sure that the district doesn't get into difficulty. The budget capacity amount is $6 million. That is only that's the new money that you can probably expect to receive each year. So when you try to get some sense of size, this is an important budget, but it doesn't have, on an ongoing basis, a whole lot of money. So budget balance carry forward becomes important. I'll be talking to you in a minute about COVID, ways in which we can enhance this lower amount. And the good thing about it is the state is kind of guaranteed. It's not totally, but it's a lot firmer than some other funds. And then we just need to find ways to direct other funds toward this budget so that we can continue to do, in the amounts indicated here, those kinds of things on a more multi-year basis. And then the total that we have here then for, we're bringing in, we're projecting to bring in 16 million from this year. It's not over yet, but that will figure into then our total balance for next year. And that's a part of the revenue that supports this $24 million budget. Adjacent ways is 2.6 million. And I believe the board is aware that we should proceed in allocating that money to those projects that need that help and move on. I think it's adequate for a while. You'll remember that if you have new construction or building additions or things like that, you tend to involve this fund because it's infrastructure. And it has to be approved as eligible by the SFB. They're not passing judgment on what the need is. They're just passing judgment on what the statute says in terms of what you can spend the money for. And then at some point, you're going to need to add a small amount to the tax rate in which to replenish this fund because it's 100% property tax. And the only way it gets there is for you, when you adopt a budget, you have a larger budget than you have in cash, and then the county will levy that difference so that you have that amount of money to use. And I think you're fine because I don't think there's a plan to spend a lot of money on new construction, although there is some. And so at some point, as that depletes itself, you may need to add a little bit of money to the tax rate so that you can replenish it. And the current bond is 3.6 million that we're assigning out to major projects and to equipment upkeep and to basically the school capital projects. I kind of skipped over that one. It's on page 8. It says capital projects, schools, and district. The schools have requested monies to do some improvements at each of their schools. We gave them that opportunity. The request, of course, came in fairly heavy, as you would expect. Sherry and David went out, looked, and decided what the highest priority items were. That's what this amount represents. So it's another effort toward allowing a voice on the part of school staff and school administration to not just furniture and equipment, but I need to do this, and it doesn't get lost in the process. And if it makes it to the list, I think there's a strong commitment on the district's part that it will do the projects that are listed here. You don't need to worry about that. It's funded. It'll get done. And all we need to do is, after your approval, develop a schedule to make it happen. Okay, the last slide is the calendar. Same calendar that you have seen before. Tonight, March 10th, you'll see a part of that item is a second review of the capital budget. And then I'll be talking to you shortly about COVID. And then on April 7th, we will be asking you to give tentative approval to this capital budget so that we can move ahead with planning projects and doing actually some purchasing that will be dated July 1st so that the obligation for payment occurs in the next year. That will help everybody, especially campuses who have some real desires to try to get some things done before school starts. And your early approval will help us get underway with that. Okay, then on April 21st, we will talk to you about the potential bond. We may even talk to you on April 7th, depends on our schedule, but beginning at least on the 21st, and then extending to May 12th, we will be talking to you about a possible bond and what that might consist of. We've studied the alternatives for the last probably 3 or 4 months. So we've spent a lot of time trying to take a fairly reasonable and limited amount and stretch it into what we think were the highest district priorities. And then on June 9th, and that's a date that's pretty important, because if you don't take action to approve a resolution for a bond, we will not have the latitude of calling that election later, nor will we be able to do a November election. It's the lead time required in the statute. So, that's coming. And so I wanted you to be aware with no surprises. And there are a couple of meetings that we'll be talking about those projects at a fairly extensive list. Totals $95 million, so it's a significant budget over the next 5 years that we'll be talking to you about, and it comes from bond if you choose to make a decision to have an election. So, members of the board, that summarizes the capital budget, and any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
Okay.
President Reese, members of the board, one of the things I'll share with you is that we started talking in October about, we had you approve looking at an updated demographic study. We also did a facilities index, and as you've read in your status reports, there have been walking all of our facilities to figure out where is our space, where is our growth. The wonderful thing is we now have this information that we are compiling so that starting in April and May, leading up to June, we're going to be able to provide, we've done a lot of background information so that we can help make informed decisions about what does our future growth look like, what are our priorities and needs, what are our greatest maintenance projects and plans, what would it look like if we were to pass a bond, what would it look like if we did not, and what are some different options. And you've also read about looking at things like is there potential for paying off one of the middle schools and saving a substantial amount of money. And so we have a lot of information that'll be coming to you for you to help make those decisions so that when we go in to call that, we would know what we would be looking at, what it would look like if we did, what it would look like if we didn't. And again, a lot of work that's literally been compiled throughout this whole year to get us to this place where we have a real clear, we'll have the information to help make the most informed decision as possible.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll go to 7.4, which is our overview of COVID grant funding.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. All 3 ESSERs are here. ESSER 1, the first round, the district's allocated $3.2 million. We have chosen to assign that to M&O. And how do we do that? Is we simply pick up expenditures that we've already made from M&O that applied to COVID and move those expenditures to a fund for ESSER 1. Then what that does is it allows the district to have more balance at the end of the year in M&O. We've made a transfer. Okay, so it's a way to, another way to describe it is a way to bank money for future use. And probably have that occasion. That's, and it's one-time money, but also it's being used, I think, wisely in making sure that it's banked in the right place with the right emphasis. So that's ESSER 1. And we've already transferred all of the 3.2 from M&O to ESSER 1. ESSER 2 is $2.7 million. That was passed by Congress a few months back. That has been assigned generally to capital. You saw earlier, just a few minutes ago, the use we were making of budget balance carry forward. This reinforces the net amount by $2.7 million. So it brings back into the budget balance carry forward for capital a cushion. Is something that your district can use later on for capital purposes. And so again, it's banking 2.7. In this case, we're choosing to bank it into capital, where the first one we chose to bank it into M&O. And then the last one, the one that just passed Congress today, I believe, is from ESSER 3, and that is estimated at 6.7 million. It's a big one. And that ESSER 3, along with the other two, brings the total over $12 million. So that's the district's benefit from the COVID legislation. You see on the far right-hand side that there's a time frame. We'll easily meet that and then some. I mean, we've already started ESSER 2, and we intend to get that done by June 30th. So that only will leave outstanding ESSER 3. And the likelihood is probably by the time that money funnels to us and we get it in the bank, we're probably talking summer or fall. And as you can see from the footnote, 25% of that amount needs to be used for regression. And Mrs. Richards talked to you already about some of those subjects with summer school. So ESSER 3 has some flexibility. We know that we have a quarter of it that we need to set aside for regression. We have some money that we will use for indirect costs. That's permitted. And indirect cost, remember, offsets M&O directly. And then whatever amount remains, I'm guessing 3 to 4, somewhere in that range, million, that's going to be a district decision at the time, a decision from you about where do you want to assign it, what do you want to assign it to, and it's a fairly large sum of money, and I think we've covered well the M&O capital budgets already. So it's really monies that are more discretionary as to what the board feels the district's needs are. So that's an update, Madam President, members of the board, on COVID funding. Remember, it's one time, but if you strategize making sure that you're building your bank account, I think that's a good way to go and have the federal government pay for things that we needed to do and had to do in order to comply with the health department. We might as well get the maximum benefit from that by transferring all of and get creative in that transfer at times, all the items we can into a federal grant.
So, Mr. Gadd, is there an ESSER 4?
I'm sorry?
Is there an ESSER 4?
According to the newspaper, they are going to propose, the one I read, we still don't have enough, and there's going to be an ESSER 4, and everybody, the businesses and everybody said, oh yeah, we need an ESSER 4. So could be. We're going to run out of numbers here pretty soon, and you keep sending more money,
Any other questions? Nope. All right, so we'll go on to 7.5, which is the presentation for the tentative approval of the M&O budget for fiscal year 2021 and 2022.
President, members of the board, Mr. Moore has spent a great deal of time on the M&O budget. As you know, it's the largest one we have. And he will be presenting to you this PowerPoint. I think we're in wonderful shape. We're giving a salary increase that's more than anybody I know of. So we're rewarding staff a lot through trying to use the money in the best way we know how. And Mr. Moore will present to you what our expenditures are and what our balance is and what the salary increase recommendation is that we've told you about in the past. And I just wanted to compliment him publicly. He's done a really good job with it. New to the district, had to learn fast, but he's done a really good job. Excellent job. Thank you. Tyler, it's all yours.
You put me on a high pedestal there, Mr. Gadd. Good evening, President Reese, members of the board. This, I believe, is the fourth time we'll be bringing this to you guys as information. Then, as you see later in the agenda, we'll be asking you for an action for approval. So we'll go to the M&O highlights. As Mr. Gadd just went over, our COVID relief funding, we have a little more clarity on some of the amounts that we're receiving. As he mentioned, ESSER 1 has been fully expended and reflected in this M&O budget that we are recommending for tentative approval. ESSER 2, we are working on moving that into our capital budget, so that will not be reflected in the numbers that you're presented here. And then ESSER 3, while we have an estimated amount, that amount is still being determined, and we have not received any funding for that currently, but and like Mr. Gadd mentioned, we'll determine where that greatest need is, whether that is our M&O budget for next year or our capital budget. Second bullet there, we've recognized a 117 ADM loss, which is less than 1% of our total student population. If you've read the newspaper or seen other districts, they're experiencing a lot larger losses. So we're grateful in that we're not in that position, and you'll see that reflected in our budget that we're going to be presenting here, in our revision, and then our projected 22 budget. We are estimating that we're not going to budget for an increase in student enrollment, nor a decrease. We're going to keep it flat. And like I've mentioned before, any increase in student enrollment will go directly to benefit our budget for fiscal year 22. We are still reflecting in this budget the $3 million reduction in funding for online learning. As we mentioned, that was not a board decision made based on funding, but this is the reality of how the state is funded those online sessions. So we are looking at an update in May. They have asked for an updated numbers in terms of what students we have online versus what we have in district. And they're going to take an overall average of our yearly totals and determine that reduction. So working with Student Information Services, I think we're going to look at roughly like a $1 million reduction. We're looking at about 20% online for the total year. And that's an average. And again, that's an estimate. But so we're expecting this number to come down. It's not reflected in our budget. We're still recognizing the $3 million loss. So keep that in mind as we move through this presentation. The State Senate has passed Senate Bill 1433. This still has a way to go through the House and then to the governor's office. A lot of this bill would fund fiscal year 21 at 100%. What we've heard, though, is with these COVID dollars that schools are receiving, there's a lot of pushback onto whether districts need this funding or this one-time funding at 100%. If it was up to me, we need this. This is estimated $268 million for all districts. This is a huge loss that all districts are receiving. And again, this is not based on, decisions were not based on budgetary. These were based on student needs and safety. And so I think, it's a little unfair to see districts punished, so to speak, for this kind of choices they've made. So we're hoping that moves through the House and passes, but we're still monitoring that. Second bullet there, we're implementing, again, a phased plan to reduce M&O transfer to capital. Mr. Gadd touched on that on the capital budget. Currently, we're budgeting in this current year $6 million. We're going to be bringing that down to 4.4 in our May revision, and you'll see that reflected in this next slide. And then again, we're not going to project any increase to the employee and to their benefits rate for next year. The district will be picking up all the increase, and I believe we're looking at, if Ms. Martin's give me a number, of 4% increase in medical in this next year. So I've reduced the formula to 3 lines. It's a little easier to follow, and it makes the math really simple. So we got the first bullet here is our estimated 22 general budget limit. So this is considering the phased reduction that Mr. Gadd mentioned in the capital budget of $2.9 million. Taking into consideration the base support level for next year that we know, the inflation that we've talked about, we're looking at a JBL of $104 million. And then we look at bullet point 2 there. This is going to be our May revision. So this is our current year budget. Remember, school districts are funded on current year, so we have to do a revision in May to adjust our adopted budget. Our May revision is going to include the reduction from the M&O transfer, where we budgeted $6 million. We're going to bring that down to 4.4. It's going to include, right now, currently we're including the distance learning adjustment of a $3 million loss. We're hoping that changes, so then this will increase this JBL difference, hopefully by May. We'll hope those numbers are reflected by May. But currently, this is our loss. So We've included it in there. And then bullet point 3, it doesn't include ESSER 2, which we've talked about moving to capital. And it doesn't include potential ESSER 3 relief funds that we may recognize in this year, but more than likely will receive funding going into next school year. So you take those two numbers, and the difference is $8.6 million. That is our general budget limit difference. That is excess budget that we have to use for next year. The next slide, you'll see the slide here. This is what we've recommended that we utilize this excess budget for. In the action item, you'll see preceding this information item, the district will be recommending a 5% increase. And so we'll look at that 5% column there. You'll see the 5%, the total cost of the district with benefits is roughly $3.5 million. You'll see the $8.6 million, that's our budget difference. So if you reduce the cost for the 5%, and then you take into the consideration the fixed costs that we've talked about, the increased medical benefits, the reclassification of some FTEs and additional FTEs that we're looking at for next year. You take those two numbers minus the JBL difference, and that will give you a budget balance of $3.6 million. So that number right there is a conservative number that we're looking at maintaining as our budget balance difference, or budget balance carry forward for next year. That's a conservative number of roughly 3.5%. And again, that's considering the full learning loss adjustment, no ESSER 3 funding or contributions to the budget. So this 3.6 would allow for any unknowns next year, any sort of budgetary items that we have not projected. This is what this remaining balance would be used for. Excuse me. And then some highlights that we've talked about tonight. Ms. Martin has mentioned, Dr. Foley has mentioned, this 5% increase to employees would really go a long way in showing our support as a district, especially this year. It also maintains competitive salaries with our neighboring districts in order to retain and attract teachers. A lot of districts are having a hard time fulfilling or filling teacher positions. Thankfully here, we are fully staffed, as Ms. Martin has said, but this reiterates that importance that Higley has put on staff and teachers with this increase. Again, this recognizes no additional employee benefit costs. It maintains the current benefit amount, I should say. And then it provides a contingency, like I just mentioned, of 3.5%. Again, that's not considering the distance learning adjustment or ESSER 3 funds. 3.5% is a very conservative number, and we believe it provides enough budget contingency for any unknowns that we may face next year. And again, it also allocates for the additional FTE and reclassifications that we are looking at doing. And then another highlight, again, it projects a flat enrollment for next year. So again, any increase in student enrollment that goes directly to benefit or increase our budget balance carry forward. So with that, do we have any questions?
Just have one, and whether Ms. Martins or Mr. Moore can answer. With what we've been presented for our new salary schedules, has that been factored in with all of our new hires, the change of our salary schedules that was presented tonight that we'll look at on April 7th?
I'll answer initially, and I'll let Ms. Martins recross. So what we budgeted in this 5% here is a 5% increase, not only to all current employees, but to the salary schedule. But due to some equity and the change of the salary, the base rate, Ms. Martins only recognized a 2.5% increase to the base, so any new hire would come on at 2.5, which again prioritizes any current employees and not kind of puts an equity in there. But it also is a budget savior because we're not budgeting the full 5% to our base rate only to current employees. I'll let Ms. Martins elaborate.
Well, and just to kind of clarify, because, I mean, Mr. Moore's been really great. He's spent some time with me and going through explanations, and because of our contracts, we do have to make a decision on the projected salary increases, and part of my conversation with Mr. Moore has been my concern of being able to sustain. And for our future budget, and we've been planning. So my concern can we sustain those increases? And we've talked about our future budgets and everything, and now we've seen a new salary schedule, and I do understand the difference between our new salary schedules for new hires, and this is for our current employees. But I have to look at the future to determine current, to make sure, again, that if we're making this decision, we can sustain those. And I know you've done a great job on the budget, and I know you're not looking at just now. We've had lots of conversations of looking at the future. So have we talked about how the new salary scale plays into our budget going forward? And again, just from my standpoint, is to ensure we can sustain these types of increases, because I would love to do them, but the last thing I want is in 2 years going, now we don't have it.
Certainly, President Reese, members of the board. As Mr. Moore mentioned, we've had dialogue both in Finance Cabinet and in regular Cabinet about this 5% and the confidence that we have in terms of our budget and being able to sustain it as we move forward. Something that we mentioned, I think, quite a while ago in terms of our status reports is that we had quite a bit of vacancy savings, or what I term vacancy value. As Mr. Moore, Finance Department, Mr. Gadd, myself, and others members of Cabinet, they've set aside a separate $500,000 for new FTE. So any positions that we're having that are going to start on this new schedule is current FTE that we already have in place. And some of that, as we talked about, is going to be a repurposing of certain FTE that we have not filled within the district for a long period of time. Positions that actually, it was like, oh, I didn't know we had this position. But for some reason or another, with previous leadership in finance, continued to roll over the budget of those dollars in the last 3-4 years, which created this large vacancy savings and allowed us to reassess and kind of take a bigger picture in how we move forward with this. So it's not that we've created all this new positions in which then could be concerning to you guys as board members and or to our community, but looking at what we have, and as Mr. Moore mentioned, looking at that at an increase at 5%, but when it really came down to discussion and equity and value, as well as to some extent being a little conservative, we said 2.5 made the most sense to see where it goes, and then we'll move forward from there.
And then President Reese, the formula that we're budgeting off of is a continuing formula from the state. Unless the state changes that formula, our budget will not change. So we're budgeting to that formula, which is our student population currently, the current budget that we have, and then the increasing base rate, which is a per student formula, or per student number, excuse me. So unless that number changes, which historically that has always gone up with inflation or adjustments by the state, we are budgeted for future to maintain this increase going forward.
I just wanted to be sure that we were also, and I have no doubt you were, because you guys have worked really well together, having the conversation as we increase our new ones coming in, that we're taking that into account as well. And so, we're not voting on the salary schedule until April, but we're looking at some major changes to our budget, some large increases, both for the future of new employees coming in, because our salary schedule is changing, and what we will be offering for our current employees. So just wanted to double check that. My concern is I don't want to be spending the same pot of money when we're increasing different things and going, oh, well, that was a sole and separate conversation. This was our budget left after that, and now we're increasing this, and that was a sole and separate conversation, but it's still impacting the same bottom line. And so I know, like I said, you guys have been great on communication. I just wanted to verify that those conversations are happening as we're increasing our salary schedules for the future, as well as our increases, because that has been my largest concern, is just the sustainability of it. So, thank you.
Madam President, if I could just add a couple of things to your concern about that sustainability. You have to remember, as Mr. Moore said, that's a continuing formula that's got a base amount of a little over $4,000 per student. This state with a $200+ million rainy day fund is not going to be anywhere close to wanting to alter that. And even when we were in a recession, they chose to alter capital outlay and not M&O. So you know they will put a priority there. The only thing down the road that could affect the district in a negative way is a massive loss of students, because that's the key of what you multiply that base support level by. We're benefited because we only had 117 loss. You know, we're talking districts in the 3,000 and 4,000 loss range. So we're in good shape, and the state will help, I'm sure, sustain M&O, especially driven by those districts that have been so heavily impacted. They will want legislation to fix this 95% and all the rest of it. Plus, we've got an added $12 million of COVID. That really helps reinforce the use of some of the balance because it's being replaced by COVID. So, I mean, I think for the foreseeable future, I think it's really solid. You might find down the road that the 5 has to become 3 or 4 in a given year, assuming the 5 is already in the base, just because, the state's not allocating. Their inflation factor, as you know, is 1.2%. That's, it's a lot smaller. And if the economy picks up, which I think it will, it's going to get larger. If you look at the sales tax revenue, which I thought for sure was going to be down, it's up dramatically. And it's up because people stayed home and bought things off of Amazon and eBay. Literally. I mean, it's enormous. I mean, you would think with the pandemic and all of that, people staying home, not buying anything, well, you're wrong. They use their computer to buy a whole lot. And so, even the sales tax subject, which was gloomy to start with because of anticipation, has turned out to be a lot more than they ever anticipated. So that helps with their rainy day fund and all the rest of it. So I have every confidence that you're fine. And you now have the advantage of, because of your demographics, you have an advantage of giving the staff more than others do, and take advantage of that.
Thank you. And again, Mr. Moore, thank you for spending quite a bit of time with me and going through some different things. I have to say it's definitely made me more comfortable with this request for sure.
President Reese.
Mrs. Wilson?
I just want to thank our teachers, staff, and the cabinet even on the ADM number of 117. I think we gloss over that sometimes, but it is a big deal, 117 where people have lost thousands. And I think our teachers, staff, and cabinet, all the district together has made that number. And just give yourselves a pat on the back, because I appreciate you and I appreciate all the work that you've put in to only lose 117. That's a big deal. So thank you.
President Reese, Vice President Wilson, we are so proud of our employees. I think one of the things Higley can be very proud of is that through a pandemic of unknown, unprecedented, all the words we've used, what's been one of the most important foundations of this is how our team in this district has come together from every corner, from every department, as a collective group of employees to do what we can for our students and for our community. And I think that's something we are super proud of. And again, has really made us stand out and something we're real proud of. So our employees are truly a reflection of the quality and caliber of what we're doing. And one of the things we're only continuing to do is celebrate that success, but also grow from what we've learned in this process. So I appreciate that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Moore.
President Reese, members of the board, the other thing I wanted to kind of piggyback on, one of the things you heard and you've read in your status reports is when we're looking at tight position control instead of, we really know now, what do we have? How are we staffing? What is our standard, so that we always at any given time know where we are with what that staffing need is, which is another nice thing that we have worked through this process. So again, working collaboratively to truly give you what we know, and I'll maintain that moving forward.
Will online teachers be paid differently, or will they be on a different scale than the in-class teachers? If that's the right time to ask, I'm sorry. Okay.
President Reese, Board Member Anderson. So at this time, we're still identifying and discussing the components of the Higley Virtual Academy and what that looks like. Later this week, there'll be information sent out to families about next year and what Higley Virtual Academy is, and clarifying and hopefully answering questions that they might have. As a result, we have actually done some communication to some employees that are currently teaching online, and what we anticipate as we issue contracts out tomorrow, what that would look like, and that is that right now, any position in which they are teaching online, their continuing teacher, they will receive a contract that's anticipated for in-person at the site that they were at prior to moving online or prior to moving to remote work. As we continue to assess, we have to really look at what our enrollment numbers are. We anticipate that there's going to be some level that's going to be different next year for HVA because of the fact that COVID is still in existence. Although, in listening to the radio the other day, I heard the CDC is now saying you could have functions at your home where you don't have to wear a mask and you don't have to social distance. So that's a positive in the bigger picture, especially if you've been vaccinated, somebody outside of your household. So who knows what next year is going to look like. We'll have to see what those enrollment numbers are, but we anticipate at the elementary level that we will need full-time positions, whether it be a full-time for each grade level or a full-time position that might share grade levels. It's going to be based on that enrollment. And then at the secondary level, we anticipate the model in which prior to COVID, all of this occurring in the secondary level, that it really is going to be asynchronous learning. And as a result of that, and our curriculum that we have with Florida Virtual Academy, looking at a per student basis in terms of compensation. Again, not knowing what our numbers are going to look like, we'll have to see what that is going to be in the larger capacity. But it's unlikely that we'll have full-time positions at the secondary level because of that. I would be surprised. I've not heard anything new coming from other districts that have had long-time virtual academies if they're looking to do some things different. I do know that there were some districts that when we looked to move to creating our online virtual academy, they talked about the fact that they would want to look to do some things differently, but financially, in so many ways, it probably wouldn't make sense. I mean, we already, as Mr. Moore mentioned and Mr. Gadd, receive less funding for students that are online. So we know that traditionally virtual academies are not financially successful, but yet it's an important need that our community is interested in, and a need that we need to look to offer as a result, but how do we do it in the best way we can?
President Reese, Board Member Wilson, to piggyback on that. So today, actually, I think at 2:30, correct? The communication, as we shared today at 2:30, communication went out to those families who are currently online. The website is now updated. The same communication that says you need to let us know what it is you want what you want. If you're wanting to learn more, if you're wanting to be online, that way, as we know, numbers will drive what those staffing needs are. So whether or not, and again, elementary looks a little different than secondary, but again, depending upon what those numbers are, it helps us identify how many online teachers do we need. All of our current continuing teachers, as Ms. Martin said, will receive a contract, but it will be for in-person. So if they want to do online, they can apply for online, but they will receive a contract. And our numbers will continue to drive how many full-time elementary do we need and how many per student secondary placements will we be providing for compensation. So again, the good news is today that communication went out at 2:30. I got an email. It's out. It's live for those who are currently online, and our website is up so that we can begin to gauge that interest so that we can also then begin to determine how many teachers we need.
I know that would a great explanation, but I think, and maybe we're not there yet, assuming the HVA, a teacher's going to be a teacher, whether they're HVA or in person. So their contracts or offer, if you will, would look very similar to a regular teacher contract. Like you said, everyone's going to receive a contract, or anyone who is receiving a contract would receive a contract with the expectation it be in person. But we won't have a different job description for HVA teacher, will we?
President Reese, no, we don't anticipate there'll be a different job description. There just could be potentially different compensation, as we said, at that secondary level. Because, again, based on enrollment, looking at what models other places have done, it's unlikely that we could look at it's unlikely that we'll need a full-time secondary instructor because of the course offerings as well as the type of courses somebody needs. Because then you'll have somebody who's teaching, potentially they could be teaching 4 different levels of English as a result. And does that make sense? To where maybe instead of a teacher taking on a 6/5 at a site, they might decide, or doing something else at a site, they might decide, hey, I want to take an online class and I'm willing to teach, 10 students at, I'm just throwing a number out there, $60 per student,
Right.
Along those lines.
So in general, taking secondary out of it because that's going to look different, but in general, an HVA teacher is going to receive the same type of contract as a regular teacher, so they'll fall in the same salary scales, everything, for a full-time teacher.
Correct.
Secondary, like you said, that's going to have to be looked at differently because we're not anticipating it being a full-time, full-day. There's a few in this class, there's a few in that class, a different compensation strategy.
Correct.
Okay. Does that help? I wanted to make sure that we're not going to be getting a different teacher job description for HVA. It's going to be a teacher job description that we currently have. Okay.
President Reese, is this going to be a board, are we going to have like an HVA presentation coming up sometime, maybe summer or before it fully launches? Because these discussions, I think, are probably more important or more appropriate then because we have so many unknowns. So I'm just wondering if that was in the plan.
President Reese, Board Member Kaler, I don't see us having any problem coming back to you with what our staffing looks like, what are we offering, what do those numbers look like. We are just literally today sent out tell us you want to do online so we can begin to get a sense of who truly wants to go online for next year so we can staff appropriately. And then once we have those numbers, we'll have a better idea of what our staffing looks like and what we can offer or not offer, what we can and can't do and what it will or won't look like. And those numbers will drive that substantially. As you know, on our last meeting, you approved the hiring of the administration for that, and we're working on helping to begin that transition and getting that all set up. So I would envision that in very near future, we will have more details to be able to bring to you and present the state of our HBA and where we're at and what we're offering and the number of students we have who are interested in pursuing the full online experience. This will be the true unique year, though, because remember, this year we paralleled, we didn't really unenroll you from this school. You were still kind of connected with your home school. This is the year the HVA goes truly live, and we actually enroll you in the virtual academy. And we support you as a full-time virtual student in our new online academy. So this will be a first for Higley, because we, prior to this year, did not have that, and we now do. That's an important addition for us, because what we do know is that we do have families who want this. We've had families who wanted this prior to COVID, and I can envision that we will have more families who may want it next year than maybe had regularly inquired about this. But in any case, we'll be able to keep our Higley students, which is important.
Dr. Foley, if I may add to that, so President Reese, like you said, if it's a full-time teacher and they're doing it, it's on that scale. We have not decided and discussed, we've discussed, but we've not decided on what kind of scale that secondary number would be. So we would certainly bring that back to you if it doesn't model anything that we currently have, and have that discussion. But going back to Board Member Kaler's comment that there is just so many unknowns, so we kind of have to see how this plays out with information that we get.
Ms. Kaler, thank you for asking that question to make sure it comes forward. And to answer your question, yeah, I was just asking for budgetary purposes. If we're rolling an administrator over to a new position, I'm just curious how that would affect our budget if there was going to be a change, that's all. So it looks like we're soon to know, not yet. We don't know for sure yet.
And as discussed too, one of the things that we included in that allocation is when we reprioritize those funds, we already had the money for that, so we brought that in as those positions that had been rolled over, so we know we could fund it and continue to fund it, and that role is versatile, so you may be picking up multiple parts and pieces and facilitation of that. So truly, there are some unknowns, but then there are some knowns that we are putting into place to finalize the launching of our new school and sustainability for the future.
Perfect, thank you. All right, then we'll go on to our action items. 8.1, I move that the governing board tentatively approve the 2021-2022 M&O, providing a 5% salary increase for all staff.
Second.
Any other comments, I think, questions? We've heard a lot about our budget, and I just, again, appreciate that this was not the first time we've seen it. You've brought it to us over and over again, which I don't think there can be too much, and giving us the chance to ask questions and understand. So I appreciate that. And again, Mr. Moore, thank you for working with me and reassuring me we are good on this increase.
President Reese,
Mrs. Kaler.
I was just thinking, ESSER 4 could be monies from canceling state assessments. And I'm pleased as punch for this 5%. And I am really grateful to our staff who since September 8th has stepped up and done a fabulous job with our students. I truly believe that our intentions back opening our schools was putting our students first and still trying to keep everyone safe as possible. And were there cases? Yes. But now we're seeing a huge drop, and we know that having our kids in class was so crucial. And I'm just thankful to our teachers and all the staff. I mean, it took the whole village to step up and step in, and they did a great job. But I just want my statement to be known. I would love to see state assessment canceled, and the $1.6 billion that the feds are spending could be used for ESSER 4. But that's just my personal opinion.
Any other questions or comments? All right.
Well, I would just like to add, and forgive me for sounding brash, but very appreciative of the recommendation for the 5%. It will matter, and people will be very excited. But I just want to also make it clear that there still needs to be value given in other ways. There still needs to be acknowledgement of their value in other ways. This raise won't keep some teachers here, unfortunately. And that's, I'm not saying that's okay, but we tried, and it was our intention it's our intention to show that we truly are grateful that they showed up, some reluctantly with the schools open. I'm so grateful the schools are open, and I wish I could just hug and hold everybody that stayed despite their feelings for being open. And this is a great way to say thank you. But I just want to stress again, let's not stop there. Let's go above and beyond this to show that we value them. Let's have some changes in our attitude towards some staff. Let's just make sure that we keep them for the right reasons and that they truly want to stay. And that I'm sorry I'm rambling, but I just want to put that on the table as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. That's a great point. We value them, but our increase is not the only way we value them, so thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0. All right, now we will go on to 8.2. And I move that we approve the issuance of certificated educational professionals and administrative contracts with the increase listed below to the base salary for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
All right, any questions, comments? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0. All right. I know we talked about, Mrs. Kaler had asked that we have a presentation on HVA, so there is a lot of unknowns. Talking about, and just throwing this out there from an HVA standpoint, talking with some people about like, no, this is gonna be a completely different new school. Like you were saying a few minutes ago, it's not staying with your school and just doing online classes. It will be, that is your school. And it was recommended by a staff member that potentially we hold some town halls if we can, and give the community the opportunity to come and ask questions and safely hold them with space or virtually something, but to get some town halls out there and that we hold some town halls to give them the opportunity. I know as board members, that would be great for us too, but for our community to really understand the difference between this year and what HVA is, because it's different. Remote learning is not Higley Virtual Academy, even though we've heard some of the same terms and everything. So potentially with our presentation that we can look at doing some town halls. I think that was an excellent idea. Do we have any other future agenda items that we want covered?
President Reese?
Mrs.
Do we
Wilson.
know when the demographic study is going to be complete? Did I miss that in an update somewhere?
President Reese, Vice President Wilson, actually it's going to be, we're going to include some of that information into our updates with you when we talk in April about what we've learned and what have we learned in the background information. We also will be able to probably provide those in status for you updates. And if so desired, we could invite Rick Bramer to come back and do it, although I think we spent an awful lot of time in a work study, and I think what we can do is provide the highlight updates, and if more information is desired, we can provide it, but it's coming. It's coming as part of our so what, now what, where are we, and what do we need to consider when we think about next decisions for those budget conversations.
Thank you. I just didn't know if I missed it somewhere along the way and if we needed to put it on. but thank you for knowing.
We literally received just a draft of it just today, actually,
Okay,
in
great.
Finance Cabinet with updates. So we're compiling all of these things as part of the background information to help us answer questions and provide you information.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, with that, then I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Have a great spring break.